Good day, everyone. This is Mark Neve. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer for the Association of American Medical Colleges. I want to thank all of you for joining us today for a very important topic and a very important seminar that an issue that we've been dealing with at the AAMC, addressing at the AAMC for many, many years. The title of today's webinar is Attracting Black Men to Medicine, Physicians' Call to Action. And I'm really excited and pleased to be joined by the American Medical Association today and representatives from the National Medical Association and the Student National Medical Association. This issue obviously is one that's too big for any one organization to attempt to tackle by itself, so it's wonderful to have such partnering organizations working with us and willing to address these very challenging issues with us. Today is just one important topic of many that we cover in our AAMC Diversity 3.0 learning series. So beyond today, I hope you'll join us or come to our website, aamc.org/diversity, and see some of our other webinars in the past, but certainly keep alert for future webinars. So I really, again, want to thank you for joining us today and addressing this important issue. This past year, many of you know that we published a report in partnership with the National Medical Association called Altering the Course, Black Males in Medicine. The purpose was to really shed light on this issue that we believe has been neglected. Not that people didn't understand or recognize that it was an issue, but the analysis of the lack of black men in medicine really hadn't been done before. And we took this on back in August of 2015 and released the report at the NMA meeting in Detroit. Basically, we've lost 100 African-American men from 1978, the first-year class, to this current 2014, to the 2014 entering class. And that's the issue. That's what the report was really highlighting. So what we've done today is to ask several of our colleagues, again, representatives from both the AMA and the NMA, to join us to discuss this important topic. I'm going to ask each of them, before they go into a brief 5-minute or so presentation, just to do an introduction of themselves. So I'll begin with Dr. Bright. Dr. Cedric Bright, I'll turn to you to just give some remarks on this topic.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be a participant in this, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share. I am, as noted, Dr. Cedric Bright. I am an assistant dean for admissions here at the school at UNC Chapel Hill. I run the Office of Special Programs with a great staff, and I also still see patients as an internal medicine physician. I'm a primary care physician. I had the honor and distinction of being the 112th president of the National Medical Association. And in that role, I was able to examine this subject matter very strategically and to come up with some ideas to help discuss as it relates to this. Just by backdrop, you know, we had more African-American physicians per capita in the year 1920 than we have today. Back then, there were more medical schools that blacks came from, and therefore the number of physicians per population base, so 100 physicians per 100,000 patients, was greater in 1920 than it is today. So that underscores part of the issue that we have in front of us. So I'd like to go on and discuss some of the barriers that we might see. I forgot how to advance the slide. There you go. So some of the barriers that we see nowadays as it relates to African American males and underrepresented minorities in general are what's noted here on this slide. Number one, despite the fact that we have more African American males who are graduating from high school and more males who are graduating from colleges, we have less who are going on to pursue a graduate degree in medical education. Some of those barriers that you asked that are going on, some of them are educational barriers, and that actually speaks to the aspect of, you know, where we are with our public school system, how public schools are actually preparing our students to go on for successful careers in graduate medical education. One of the first barriers that we would note is the ability to read. Oftentimes at the third grade level is where that determinant comes into play. Certainly if we're not reading at grade level, at the third grade level, that puts us behind the 8 ball. So one of the things that we have to do is to increase the thirst for reading among our kids, to get their thumbs away from those games and have them more actively engaged in reading. The next barrier in primary education comes in the middle school time, which is with algebra. 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade algebra is the next spot in which, if you don't do well, many folks don't go on to pursue science and math. So those are two barriers in the early education system, and two sentinel marks that promote success if they're done well. The next thing that I have noticed is that there's social barriers in with the lack of role models and the way that we're often portrayed in the media. I mean, outside of athletics and things of that nature, it's very rare that we have substantial role models that are being shown in media. And I think that that sends a very important message to young minds as to what are the values and what type of aspirations they could have for the future. So I think that's another one. Another aspect of that is that many of our physicians of color are not necessarily staying in neighborhoods of color, are being engaged in those communities of color. So that's another area in which groups such as the National Medical Association and other groups and the Student National Medical Association are actively engaged in giving back in their community to be those role models to help try to combat those social barriers that we see. The next thing we just see is this whole aspect about the type of counseling students are getting. Oftentimes they're not getting the type of encouragement to keep moving. You know, it's not a matter of when you're going to have difficulty. We all have difficulty along the path. What makes the difference is how do you respond to that as opposed to react. If you have appropriate counseling, you have appropriate people that to continue to encourage you, to show you alternative ways of accomplishing your goals, that type of counseling is invaluable. So oftentimes we can fall into getting the counseling that says you're not going to make it and you believe it, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't work at it anymore, you just give up. I saw that a lot in my undergraduate days when we had probably 45 students who were pre-med at the beginning of my class. Those were blacks who were pre-med at the beginning of the year, and by the end of our 4 years, there were only about 20 of us that actually took the MCAT and continued on the path. A lot of that had to do with the weeding out classes that occurred and how they impacted students' perceptions on how competitive they would be. And then last but not least, we'll talk a little bit about admissions practices, and I'll let my colleagues go on and get started. So some of the obstacles that we see in admissions are the structure of the admissions process, you know, the people that make up the composition of the admissions committees. Oftentimes there's a miseducation of some of the learners in the aspect of not being able to know what are the actual prerequisites, what are the written rules for the admissions committee's process that you must meet in order to be qualified as a applicant. One of the other obstacles that often comes up is why we have less males is competing institutional priorities. You'll have one priority that says we want to increase diversity, but at the other priority say they want to improve their U.S. News and World Reports ranking. And one part of that ranking is a high MCAT score, and the higher your MCAT score, the higher your ranking is for. That becomes a competing priority because African Americans tend to score 4 to 5 points lower on average than white students do and Asian students do. So if you have more African Americans, more than likely your MCAT scores have decreased, which then may hurt your U.S. News and World Report. Cannot underestimate the aspect of a negative institutional climate. Certainly attitude, leadership reflects attitude, and if your leadership is not reflecting that welcoming attitude and embracing diversity and speaking from the top of the food chain that diversity is important, it's almost impossible for it to come up from the bottom. Most fish swim downstream, but trying to swim upstream is what happens when you're trying to increase diversity by increasing just the medical students and not the residents, not the faculty, and then not the administration. So it has to start from the administration and flow downstream, not from the students, and try to go upstream. And then lack of institutional leadership, we just talked about that. And then institutional inertia. We get one or two in place and we go, okay, we've arrived. One or two is not arriving. One or two is still on the beginning of your destination. I think I'm going to just let this slide sit there for a second. I'm not going to really try to go through it. Most of it I've already tried to go through. There is one point that I do see, and this is kind of significant. Oftentimes our URM students are having to work during the summers or work in order to earn the money to apply to medical and dental schools. And as such, they often will have their applications come in late in the cycle. And then that puts them behind the 8 ball because many schools have rolling admissions. So that's another area in which there is that sometimes is a definite disadvantage for our URM students and why there are less African American males in particular and URMs in general. So the last point I'll make is that lack of programs that at the earliest stages of educational development to try to foster competitive academic skills. Cannot underestimate the importance of these types of programs. Thankful to government agencies such as HRSA that does funding for these types of programs through the Health Careers Opportunities Program. Thankful also for the SNMA for the work that they do with YSEP and HPREP, which are for elementary schools and for high school students to expose them to medical arenas and mental health careers. Those things, I think, are invaluable, and I think the more that we can develop these types of pipelines, and let's not forget the Robert Wood Johnson and AAMC SMDEP program, as well as programs like the MED program here in Carolina, all parts of the pipeline that help to foster that competitive academic skills to make more students successful. That is the way we need to move in order to try to address this issue of the lack of African American males going into medical school. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Bragg. That was a very comprehensive overview of many of the challenges, both in the pipeline itself and certainly at the medical school level. So we'll have some opportunity to delve into some further cracks in the process as we get to the Q&A. Let me turn to Dr. Alma B. Littles. Alma, why don't you introduce yourself and share?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone, and certainly thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important discussion. I am a family physician, and I am the Senior Associate Dean for Medical Education and Academic Affairs at the Florida State University College of Medicine in Tallahassee, Florida, and currently serve as chair of the Academic Physician section of the AMA. The section actually just changed its name this year and its categories for membership to make it more inclusive of all academic physicians, not just those within the hallways of our medical schools, but also reaching out to academic physicians and community-based residency programs and those leading CME and research efforts in their institutions. The section addresses multiple areas that pertain to medical education, from curricular, accreditation, and certification issues to physician well-being, to issues around residency program availability and unmatched medical students, to name a few. We also work closely with the AMA's Council on Medical Education, Medical Student section, and Resident Physician section, and we recognize the need to address diversity in the physician workforce in this country. Next slide, please. The CDC states that health equity is when everyone has the opportunity to attain their full health potential and no one is disadvantaged from achieving this potential because of their social position or other socially determined circumstance. Research has shown that minority physicians and physicians from rural backgrounds are more likely to practice in underserved population areas. Therefore, attracting a more diverse student body will enhance the pool of physicians caring for our increasingly diverse populations. So the benefits of a diverse physician workforce would include, first, it adds cultural competence in medical education and within the profession. Just the exposure of students from different walks of life to each other is an educational experience in itself. 2, it increases patient trust in the healthcare system, thereby enhancing compliance. You know, we can't forget Tuskegee. It was a long time ago, but it's still very fresh in the minds of many African Americans. Patients relate to and follow advice from physicians who look like them. And that doesn't mean that only African American physicians can gain that trust from African American patients, but it offers choice to those patients who are more comfortable with African American physicians. 3rd, it provides role models to inspire future physicians from diverse populations to pursue the profession. When you're from a disadvantaged population, regardless of what has created that disadvantage, it can be quite intimidating to figure out how to navigate the system to just get to the table of the medical school admissions process. There is a message when students and residents aren't able to see any evidence that they are welcome to a school or a program, even when that is not the intent of the institution. Having someone that you can relate to goes a long way in easing that intimidation. Challenges faced by applicants from underserved populations include, and some have been mentioned a little bit, medically underserved population areas are often educationally underserved as well. They tend to have poor school districts without the benefit of advanced preparation for college or professional schools. Students may not have had the educational background and structured programs to reach their full potential. And students from disadvantaged backgrounds need encouragement and opportunity. Next slide, please. And then there are the numbers. You know, in 2009, there were 42,000 plus applicants to medical schools nationally, and only 3,106 of them were African Americans, and that's male and female. You know, at Florida State, where I mentioned I, am from, we have actually had what we would consider to be a pretty good entrance of African American students, including African American males, but it's still abysmally low, even though it's higher than the national average. You know, about 14% of our student body are African Americans, but it's when we look at the population in general as a whole nationally, we can do better. So this session was a call to action to address the numbers, specifically for the African American male population. And so how can we do that? 1, through a holistic admissions process, and again, looking beyond standardized exams like the SAT and MCAT, so that we can get to those individuals who meet criteria for becoming successful physicians outside of those numbers and are actually going to be able to serve as role models for future physicians behind them, as well as taking care of diverse and underserved populations. 2, we need those role models that were spoken of earlier. A diverse faculty and medical community certainly helps along this line. And the pipeline needs to start early. Even before middle school, there are a number of programs that start at the middle school level, but it needs to start even earlier. Exposing students to individuals who look like them gives them the courage to reach and the faith to believe that they can attain a goal. Encouraging faculty members to participate in community activities, and specifically activities with students from underserved populations, will be beneficial. 3rd, next slide, please. Pipeline programs and support for admitted students is also needed. Admitting students who struggle with standardized exams is a recognized risk that should not be avoided, but instead addressed head-on with the necessary resources to ensure success. Universities are beginning to pay closer attention to diversity in the undergraduate populations, so interacting with undergraduate admissions and advising offices can provide collaborative opportunities for medical schools to develop the pipeline. At FSU, pre-med advising is done by the medical schools, so we have the opportunity to interact with all of the pre-med students. And we have support systems in place to assist with MCAT preparation, getting access to appropriate volunteer experiences, and interviewing skills. We have a successful model called the STRIDE program, Science Students Together Reaching Instructional Diversity and Excellence, that we believe can be deployed in many settings. It's a program that actually starts at the middle school level and continues through high school, undergraduate, and even into a master's bridge program here, where we actually admit students, specifically looking at students who are going to meet the mission of taking care of our diverse population. We admit from the applicant pool, and then we provide the necessary resources to support those students, and they have admission to the following year's medical school class after successfully getting through that bridge program. These types of programs obviously requires access to resources and a commitment from top leadership at the institution. However, if we're going to be serious about attracting more Black males and students from other minority populations, it's not a matter of if, but one of we must do it. Once students are admitted, we need to have resources to continue to provide the support systems that enhance their success and do not make them feel isolated, neglected, or guilty that they were accepted. And finally, we should start seeking advice from those Black males who have already come through our schools and programs. We can have focus groups of current students as well as graduates of our schools, and ask them specific questions about why they chose to go to medical school in the first place, what attracted them to their specific school, what obstacles they faced in making that decision, what challenges that they faced once they were admitted and as they were going through medical school, and what advice they would have for other young Black men who are considering medicine as a career. We could also ask them what advice they would have for admissions committees to assist in the recruitment of Black males, and what advice they have for medical schools to improve the environment of education for Black males. And I would suggest that we could ask these same questions of our entire student body and graduates to get those opinions as well. So those are my initial thoughts, and I look forward to the remaining comments and to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Little. And that was a perfect segue and setup for Anthony, soon-to-be Dr. Kuluwani. I know I chopped that up, so Anthony will correct that. Anthony is currently serving as the National President for the Student National Medical Association and is currently a medical student at Tufts University School of Medicine. He's going to share with us a little bit about the SNMA, but really, more importantly, talk about many of the programs that I think most people are not aware how much the SNMA does to address this issue and the diversification of the workforce. So, Anthony, I'll turn to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Neve. As Dr. Neve mentioned, I'm Anthony Kulukulani, a third-year medical student at Tufts University School of Medicine. I am originally from Honolulu, Hawaii, but my dad was in the military, so I grew up in North Carolina. I attended North Carolina State University, where I majored in biology and plant biology. I took 2 years off to do research before matriculating into medical school. I currently serve as the National President for the Student National Medical Association, and so today I'll be speaking about our organization and some of our efforts to help attract Black males to medicine. Okay, so all of our organizational activities, whether on the local, regional, or national level, reflect the three parts of our mission. And this helps to address important issues within medical education and also with issues that affect underserved communities. So first and foremost, SNMA supports current and future underrepresented minority medical students, or URMs. Through our pipeline programs, SNMA provides outreach and recruitment to the medical field by targeting students from as young as grammar school all the way through college. We also provide academic resources and mentoring to help influence the retention of URMs once they matriculate into medical school. Secondly, SNMA seeks to address the needs of underserved communities. So we in the SNMA know that community service is the heart and soul of our organization. It's through our community service protocols that our chapters and regions are able to provide outreach to various populations of need. Our programs include violence prevention, international health, health maintenance and screening, substance abuse, mental health, and health advocacy. Our annual medical education conference, which will be held March 23rd through the 27th in Austin, Texas, will feature our National Advocacy Forum and its opening session will focus on this topic, minority men in medicine. Dr. Neve will be there to present, and then we'll have a follow-up panel to help provide some solutions and insight into the issue. So if you're interested in learning more and joining this discussion, I encourage you guys to attend the conference as well. So finally, because we are committed to training our members to recognize and address health disparities, we also aim to increase the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. Our recruitment efforts, academic resources, research opportunities, leadership development, and community programs are a testament to our commitment to ensuring a diverse physician workforce in medical education, research, as well as public health. And so to this end, SNMA is helping to diversify the face of medicine. So given this background of our organization, what exactly are we doing to help attract Black males to medicine? So within SNMA, we have our Pipeline Mentoring Institute. A few years ago, we recognized that many of the barriers to achieving further diversity within the medical profession lie within the continuum of elementary through undergraduate education. So we established our PMI. The PMI seeks to close the gap in preparing URM students for career in medicine and other health-related professions. Specifically, the PMI focuses on 4 things: improving general study skills, improving standardized test-taking skills and science preparation, establishing pipeline programs, and promoting age-appropriate cross-cultural competence and experiences. PMI sort of serves as the house of our existing pipeline framework, and it builds on a lot of these existing programs. It utilizes the grassroots efforts and success of the Minority Association of Free Medical Students, or MAPS, Health Professions Recruitment and Exposure Program, or HPREP, and the Youth Science Enrichment Program, or YSEP. And I'll talk about these programs on the next slide. These efforts help strengthen the educational pipeline that flows from elementary school into the health profession. By fostering academic and scientific interest as early as elementary students, we help mentor the participants as they progress through high school and college. And so with this, we are already working towards increasing the number of Black males in medicine. Additionally, the PMI will ultimately work to increase the number of culturally sensitive and capable health professions. And so just some background information on some of our pipeline programs. So for all of these programs, we have national training protocol manuals that our local chapters utilize to help guide them in these activities. So the first one that Dr. Bright mentioned earlier in the presentation is YSEP. So YSEP serves to stimulate elementary and junior high school students' interest in science and health. And then this continues with the HPREP program, which exposes high school students to science-related activities while introducing them to careers in the health field. I want to spend some time on the BASE program because I think this really tackles the issue of attracting Black males to medicine. So the Brotherhood Alliance for Science Education is devoted to increasing the encouragement, recruitment, admission, and retention of young minority males into medicine. It seeks to unite minority males around common goals and build relationships that help foster a sense of brotherhood. Among its goals, BASE focuses on mentorship, community service, and empowerment, and motivation for worthwhile and attainable goals. And so last year, under the administration of Dr. Topaz Sampson, we worked to update our BASE protocol. And this year, the chapter at Johns Hopkins has implemented it. And so based on the completion of this year, we will analyze some of the program assessments to see how effective the new protocol is in encouraging Black males to pursue medicine. Continuing on into the undergraduate level, our pre-med protocol, or the pre-medical minority enrichment and development. Through this protocol, SNMA members act as mentors to pre-medical undergraduate and post-baccalaureate students to help increase the medical school matriculation rates of URMs. Some of the things we do to do this is hosting pre-medical conferences, having clinical skills workshops, and also providing medical student panels to help address any questions that our undergraduate students have. And then I think unique to our organization, we do have a segment of our organization, the Minority Association of Pre-Medical Students. And so this is where pre-medical students are encouraged to form SNMA MAPS chapters at their respective undergraduate institutions. Right now, there are over 100 MAPS chapters nationwide, and this comprises about 1/3 of our SNMA membership. MAPS chapters are well integrated into our organizational infrastructure and participate in local, regional, and national events. And they also have elected leaders on the national level to help raise some of the concerns that our undergraduate students may have on some of the issues that they would like addressed to help help them matriculate into medical school. And so with that, I will turn it over to the next presenter.
Thank you, Anthony. That was a wonderful overview, and let me say now, you know, without SNMA, I think we'd all be in a boatload of trouble in trying to really increase the number of black men in medicine more so than we currently are. So it's a real commitment to your organization, and thank you for your leadership. With that, I'll turn to Dr. Patrice Harris, serving as chair-elect of the American Medical Association Board of Trustees. Dr. Harris?
Yes, well, thank you very much. I am Dr. Patrice Harris. I'm chair-elect of the American Medical Association Board of Trustees. I'm a child and adolescent forensic psychiatrist in Atlanta, Georgia. And on behalf of the AMA, I'm very pleased to be engaged in this conversation this morning, but more importantly, not just the conversation, but certainly the dialogue that's going to get us to solutions. You know, organized medicine has a critical role to play in a couple of areas. One, to make sure that this issue is a priority. Second, to lead the way and be the role model for collaboration. And finally, I'll talk today about some of the efforts that we have ongoing at the American Medical Association. So this issue is critical as we look at the future of medicine, and it really requires leadership commitment, inquiry, strategy, and engagement from all of us. But again, organized medicine has a key role to play. And as we develop strategies, we have to make sure that there is the appropriate investment in human and financial capital. We have to make sure that we are strategic about this, and we have to hold ourselves accountable. Using, I think we all are aware of the SMART strategies. Our strategies have to be specific, measurable, achievable, and accountable. We certainly have to hold ourselves accountable to the outcome, and they have to be relevant, and they have to be time-bound. We don't have time to do a lot of discussion. Again, I like to say sometimes enough about the problems, let's talk about the solution. So we have to be action-oriented and solution-oriented. And others on the call have talked about the benefits both internally and externally regarding workforce research, our patients, the health of our patients, and public health. Collaboration is easy to say, but much more difficult to implement. But this is certainly an all-hands-on-deck issue, and we have to look not only at what I call the usual suspects, but we also have to look at the folks who are not engaged. Who do we need to bring on board as we develop solutions to this issue? Are there foundations out there that had not been engaged by this issue that we need to engage? Many colleges and universities are, but many are not, as you've heard earlier. And so we need to make sure that we get, again, all hands on deck from all of our colleges and all of our universities. Medical societies, clearly, the medical societies represented on this call are engaged, but what about our partners at the state and local levels? Again, we have to make sure that our specialty societies are also engaged in this issue. Our hospitals and clinics and medical centers and even our private practitioner colleagues involved in this issue. I think we heard Dr. Littles talk about the fact that at the AMA they've broadened their scope regarding the academic physicians, and I think we need to look at those that are training our medical students and our residents in their private practices. What about community and faith-based organizations? How can we get them involved, as well as civic and other volunteer organizations? And we've already heard, again, about the engagement and how critical our STEM pipeline programs are to this effort. And again, we have to make sure that this is addressed on a national level, but also a local level. I'd like to take just a few moments then and talk about what we are doing at the American Medical Association. we have a couple of programs that are administered through our AMA Minority Affairs section, and this is the Minority Scholars Award. It began in 2004. The partners include the AMA Minority Affairs section, the AMA Foundation, and I'm also a board member of the AMA Foundation and Pfizer. And to date, $1.5 million in tuition assistance has been awarded to nearly 150 first and second-year medical students. We need to figure out how to broaden that, increase that, and I'm proud to say that Anthony, who you just heard from, is a past recipient. Our Doctors Back to School program, I think, is a critical program. The Minority Affairs Section Governing Council conducts Doctors Back to School visits in conjunction with each AMA annual and interim meeting at local elementary schools. And I'm just very proud to say that the most recent interim meeting was here in Atlanta, and that program was very highly valued by our local school here in Atlanta. And I have to say it was a great photo of the young kids with the AMA Doctors Back to School backpacks. I think that was meaningful on so many levels, and so I think that's a great program that we have at the AMA. We also have the Commission to End Healthcare Disparities. The founding members are the AMA, the NMA, and the NHMA. And we have our Committee on Workforce Diversity and Leadership Development. Again, critical programs that we need to continue to support and make sure that we are, again, being very strategic as we address this issue. And finally, I want to talk about AMA policy. We have a wealth of wonderful policy to address this issue, and policy is critical because it does guide organizational priorities. It certainly inspires association strategy and tactics, but it also influences individual members and others who rely on us in organized medicine to determine what policies will move us forward on this issue. And I think we all know that policies drive our advocacy agenda. And so I really am very proud of the work that the AMA, but really all of us in organized medicine are engaged in to address this issue. I say, and on a personal note, this issue is personal to me. I grew up in West Virginia, and I wanted to be a physician since the 8th grade. But when I got to college, one of my college advisors recommended that I go to nursing school. Nursing is a noble profession, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And so we need to make sure that there is support out there for those who want to go to medical school, and that support begins early. And there is a continuum of support until we address this issue of engaging African American men and make sure they are well represented in our medical school as our future physician leaders. So thank you. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mark, and I think we now have time for question and answers.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Harris, and thank you really to all of you for the quality of your comments, and certainly also maintaining with our time, leaving us enough time to get into a good Q&A here. Dr. Harris, you mentioned, that we really need to get to solutions, and I think that's the right point we need to get to. So I'm going to ask people just to chime in and start sending questions to us. There, as you can see, how you go about that there listed in front of you as the slide. And I'll monitor this and filter questions out to the panelists. We've had a few questions come in already, and one is in that same vein of getting to solutions. And maybe I'll turn to Cedric to address this first question. It's a direct question about medical schools. What steps are medical schools taking to admit more African Americans into medical school? You want to take a shot at that, Cedric?
Yeah, I'll be glad to, Mark. I think some of the steps that we are doing are looking at, in some aspects, looking more at a holistic approach when it comes to the application, not just looking at the numbers, not just looking at the MCAT and the GPA, but looking at the journey of the student coming into medical school. What was their family life? What type of adversity have they overcome? What are the type of hurdles that they've had to overcome? I think when you start evaluating it more from a holistic journey, it starts to even out the playing field a little bit more as it relates to just the numbers. And then secondarily, I think that there has to be a continuation of programs like here at Carolina, we have a program called Minority Men in Medicine, which is a stepwise mentoring process in which medical students are paired up with undergraduate students and help to mentor those undergraduate males as they're making their journey to the application process. I think having those types of activities also enhances your pipeline.
Thank you, Dr. Bright. Dr. Littles, do you want to chime in on that as well?
Sure. I mentioned in my, opening comments, certainly that some of the programs we have here at Florida State, and I know that there are other schools who have, similar programs, perhaps not as extensive, but certainly, similar programs, to that. But as I said earlier, it's important to have the support system there, even once the students get into medical school. But obviously, you got to attract them to the table to get the applications there first. So having, those pipeline programs early into whether it's, elementary, middle schools, high schools, and continuing to follow those students through and continue to track them and see why students who don't make the full, trek, what hindered them from making it all the way to that application process. So we have to do some adequate follow-up as well.
Excellent.
Hey, Mark, there was actually some AAMC data that was put out that showed that of all the black males that took the MCAT in 2014, that 43% of them didn't even apply to medical school. How do we start to address those types of issues?
I think that's a very good question, and I think we're really trying to get in the weeds of that data, because we're also finding even for the African American males who apply, on average they have a higher MCAT score than African American females, but they don't reapply. So there's something happening in the advising process along the way, or the lack of mentoring along the way for African American males specifically. So I think, again, we're distilling that data, and as was said earlier on this call, there's a huge opportunity for us to begin to do some focus groups with those students who we do know who they are, who took the MCAT, did not apply. There's an opportunity to engage them and find out why they chose not to apply, what other options they had, and again, those that did apply but were not accepted, why they chose not to reapply. So there's more investigation being done, and we hope to report on that in the upcoming months. There were a few questions actually around social media, and I'll turn to Anthony for that. What's the opportunity to leverage social media to reach out to these students? Given Anthony is probably a little bit closer to social media than most of us at his stage of life and career. So Anthony, you want to tackle that? What are the opportunities to leverage social media to reach out to the population we're talking about?
Definitely. Recognizing the growth of social media. Each year, the president of the organization creates an executive agenda which targets initiatives that they want the organization to focus on. And social media is actually one of the initiatives part of the executive agenda this year. Recognizing that, the kids at our age are using technology or, social media. This is how they are actually getting information. So it's a great marketing tool, and a lot of it's free too, to raising the awareness of not only of this issue, but also getting black males interested into the medical field. And so, at SNMA, we've used a lot of our social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to highlight some of our activities and to continue reaching the masses.
Excellent, excellent. Just going down the list here.
Mark,
So,
mind if I just mention one thing about social media?
Go ahead, Cedric, please.
Yeah, there's an excellent, I don't know if we said anything about Diverse Medicine, Inc., which is a virtual mentoring platform that many students can sign on to get virtual mentoring. They're developing a whole video platform of films about black males and white coats. I'd encourage you to look for those on Facebook and along your social media outlets. They have very inspirational videos to help try to increase the number of black males to get the interest in becoming physicians. So Diverse Medicine, Inc.
Appreciate that. We have a question here, and maybe I'll turn to Patrice Harris for this one. What strategies or advice can you offer black males in admissions interviewing?
Well, I think it's critical as folks go to interviewing for medical school and to practice and to rehearse. I read an article, I think in the New York Times magazine, actually earlier or late last year, about the fact that it's critical to mentor our kids throughout the process. And we may even neglect sometimes the statements that are required. So, yes, we have to make sure they're prepared. We have to make sure that they practice the MCATs, but we also have to make sure they have those skills necessary to interview well. Not everyone interviews well, and so I think that's a critical piece. And what about the personal statement? There's an art to that that not everyone will be able to, that everyone could benefit from some mentoring regarding that. So I think it's really looking at the entire process. I think one of the presenters, perhaps Dr. Bright, I think Dr. Littles, too, talked about the holistic aspect of this. And so it is teaching them how to interview well and also how to write those personal statements and what stands out. It's also critical, again, we have to make sure that they're prepared academically, but what are the other things that medical schools are looking for? They're looking for, I think now, what did you do outside of school? And so it's critical that we mentor our students in those areas as well.
Excellent. We have a question. In this time of shrinking budgets and shifting priorities and really changes in healthcare impacting our institutions, what are some of the creative options and resources that exist to fund or support effective pipeline models or programs for underrepresented minority students? Maybe I'll start with Alma, and maybe Cedric can chime in on that too.
Sure, that's actually a good question, and as I mentioned, resources are obviously necessary, for this. When early in our college, we had access to funds from the state's AHEC program, and those funds went away. But because we were committed to this, we started devoting other funds from the college to that. But as everyone else, we have to look at those budgets continually, and it's always one of those things that's there to say, we don't really get direct support for this, and so how are we going to continue it, into the future? And that's why it's important to have that commitment from the dean and the president, actually, of the university, being supportive of those programs and continuing to look for alternative sources. I think that, look into philanthropy to provide some of the support is important, and we've certainly been able to get some funding through donations from donors who also recognize the importance of that diversity in the profession and therefore in the medical student body. We continue to comb the nation for grant funding. There is still some of that funding available, particularly for programs that are starting new. Programs there, unfortunately, if you've got one that's well-seasoned and doing well, there isn't as much grant funding available. But certainly looking there for those schools that need to start something is a good start as well.
Great. Dr. Bright?
I would say that one of the aspects that we really need to do is, as physicians who are out and practicing, we need to support our own. We need to practice philanthropic activities to give back to the schools in which we graduated from in order to generate the monies for scholarships and for programmatic activities. We have to reinvest in ourselves, I think is basically what I'm saying in that aspect. Certainly there are other opportunities out there for grants and whatnot, but these, and as budgets are becoming tighter and tighter, if we're not supporting our own, it's hard to ask other people to support us.
Absolutely. There are several questions that I guess I'd put in the category of evaluation, and maybe I'll turn to Anthony to address this from the SNMA's perspective. There's a question that says, how will you measure the success of your outreach and pipeline programs going forward? So Anthony, you put a lot of, certainly the SNMA is doing a tremendous amount of work. Any thought to evaluation of the effectiveness of those interventions? That anything novel, any novel approaches you guys are taking that we could all learn from?
Sure. So in terms of our pipeline programs, for the program evaluations, they do consist of 4 components. And so we do a pre-program questionnaire to all of the participants. Then we do a questionnaire of each workshop or session, and then there's a post-program questionnaire. In addition, any of the medical student participants will also fill out a session questionnaire. And so we take all of these questionnaires to compile the data and to evaluate to see how successful, some of these interventions are. And using these evaluations is what helped us update our base protocol to sort of make changes that were needed to help address some of the pitfalls that the program wasn't addressing.
Excellent. I'm going to have an interesting question here. I hear a lot about this. Let me just reframe it a little bit, and maybe I'll ask Dr. Harris to address this. There's an individual that oversees some pipeline programs and often hears their students stumble at organic chemistry, and many of you obviously are aware organic chemistry tends to be the weeding course, and they mentioned that the student hits a complete wall. Any advice on how to manage that? So dealing directly with the students, who are coming through the pipeline, maybe get a C in organic chemistry and are probably getting advice that they, should do something else. Any way to combat that, Dr. Harris?
Well, I have to say I can relate to that. And I don't know if other colleagues can, but, I think we should step back, and perhaps we should, and I'd like to hear from the others, actually, who are, particularly in academics day to day. If that was a weeder course, is that an appropriate course to even have for other purposes now? If the only purpose, and I'm just asking the question, but if the only purpose of that course historically was to weed folks out, we need to step back and see the value in that and how that is, again, perhaps a barrier to folks getting to medical school. And then what do we need to do about that? It's a paradigm shift, I think, because before it was about competition. I read in our article that I mentioned earlier the question of, and I think we all heard it, look to your left, look to your right. One of you won't make it through this process. That sets up this competition that I don't think is a paradigm that we want to move forward. We want to be more collaborative. It should be important for all 3 folks to succeed and not so much the 2 out of the 3 to succeed. So I think we need to step back from that paradigm. If that course is the critical course, if it's required, then we may need to amp up our resources, again, to make sure that folks succeed through that course, but perhaps less emphasis on that course would be appropriate. And again, I'd like to hear, I know we're running out of time, but I'd like to hear what Dr. Littles and Dr. Bright think about that.
Dr. Littles, why don't you begin?
Okay, I will try to take a stab at that because it's certainly something that we all heard as we were, applying to and going through medical school, and it's true that admissions committees continue to look, at that course as being one that students being able to navigate it. It was, I think it's looked at as more than just a weeder in and of itself. It's it's a course that requires some, thinking on a different level and being able to come up with, solutions to problems. And so looking at some of those skills that we, hope to develop further in medical school, looking, at that. It's interesting that you bring that up, Dr. Harris, because as we start looking at, other things to look at in terms of the evaluating students for admission to medical school, there's a little bit of a buzz around the country about even eliminating the MCAT, which is obviously the other competitive factor that gets looked at by admissions committees. But in order to do that, in order to get rid of, the MCAT and get rid of the, quote, weeder course in the form of organic chemistry, we still have to come up with some criteria for making those selections for medical school, and that's the hard work. That doesn't mean it's not work that should be done and could be done, but that's certainly the hard part of it. So, putting that suggestion right there on that same level with eliminating the MCAT.
Dr. Wright, any comment there?
Add with this as well, while we have just a little bit of time. My perspective on these weed out courses is they try to use, they say the reason why we have those is it kind of predicts how well you're going to do on standardized testing, and which more importantly translates to how well you're going to pass your board's exams. The one thing that most folks are concerned about in admissions is what is our board passage rate? Because if you don't pass your boards, you can't go on to practice. And the reason why they have these stumbling blocks in place is because if they didn't, everybody would do it. And if everybody did it, then the number of professionals becomes so high that the profession itself becomes less lucrative. So many of these obstacles were put in place historically, institutionally, by medical societies in order to maintain a certain number of physicians in order to be able to keep the profession lucrative.
So there's an interesting idea put out here, and I'll paraphrase it, and then we'll look to close as we're at the hour. But the question was really, could we come together and develop, work with Coursera and develop, a course in organic chemistry, biochemistry, physics, psychology, et cetera, to really allow for these courses and support mechanisms. As you know, Coursera is free, to give students an opportunity to engage in them multiple times at their leisure to really improve the opportunity, for all students, obviously, to be more successful. So just something to think about as fodder for us to think about potential solutions in addressing this. I think the admissions process and the MCAT score, the courses that are currently expected, the pre-med courses and the MCAT are certainly not going away. And I think what we need to do is to ensure that our students are prepared to meet those hurdles that are in front of them at this point. So with that, I want to thank everyone for the robust number of questions that have come in. We are committed to addressing those questions. We will probably send them out to the panelists, pick the right panelists to address those, and then respond in kind, get back to you with those. We know who you are. So those questions that we were unable to get to will not be left hanging. The AAMC, the AMA, the NMA, and certainly the SNMA remain committed to this issue. We are partnering. This is just to get information out today and to get some of your ideas on the table, but we are committed to working together over the next several years to really address this and rectify this. What I want to leave you with is a really positive note that for the first time since 1978, the 2015 entering class has more African Americans in it than any year since 1978. Now, I'd love to say our report somehow made that happen. The proximity of that is obviously too close to take credit for it, But what I can say is that academic medicine is clearly committed to addressing this issue, and I hope this 1 year becomes a trend. It's certainly just one indicator, but I certainly hope that this time next year I could report that we've had 2 years of improvement. So again, I want to thank the panelists. It's been fantastic for you to share your wisdom and insights with us, and we look forward to more dialogue. Thank you for being part of this webinar, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.